Hi, everyone, and welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. It is the Halloween season, one of my favorite seasons of the year. And joining me is someone who has all the very cool Halloween kind of spooky vibes happening. I think there's an interesting throwback there and a spinner rack, and that is comics creator Chris Ryall. Chris, thank you for jumping in and talking with me for a few minutes.
Happy to be here, Jason. Thanks.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for saying yes. And I'll just mention a few titles up front here, a few characters and worlds that you've created in Zombies versus Robots being probably the first one that a lot of folks might associate you with,
Yeah.
as well as Masters of Horror from a little bit ago. You've done work in the world of Transformers, Mars Attacks, Kiss, Mars Attacks and Kiss, Dirk Gently. I mean, the list goes on. So you have a
It's
wonderful.
funny because Dirk Gently is sort of an outlier, but if you look at the bulk of the rest, they always involve robots, zombies, or aliens, or some combination therein.
Oh yeah, yeah, I love it. I love it. It works. Big fan of the was that oh, I'm blanking on the name. It's been a long teaching day. Dirk Gently was
Oh, Douglas
Douglas
Adams. It was
Adams.
Douglas
Yeah, yeah,
Adams. Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. I was like, so long, thanks for all the fish. My brain was like following that path. I was like, yes,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Douglas Adams. Yeah. So I love that range of creativity. Did I miss any titles in the mix that you want to make sure to add to that list?
I mean, there's some I'll mention like as we run through your questions, so no need to do a whole litany up front. But
Cool,
yeah,
cool.
that was a good overview. Like I'd forgotten things like Masters of horror, which was fun because then I got to work with people like Joe Lansdale and
Mhm.
other creators of that ilk, which is great.
Oh yeah, yeah. Joe Lansdale did a Batman novel, something about the engines from back in the day. My memory's not serving well on the spot, but I remember being entertained by the Batman aspect of it and also frightened at the same time.
Yeah, there's not a lot Joe can't do. Joe's great.
Oh yeah, yeah. So speaking of those questions, I just mentioned you'd created in many, many worlds and across many forms. So curious about maybe a particular mile marker that you're fond of, a particular title or experience that rises to the top.
And there were a few. I mean, one that really stands out to me is ROM, which was like it's a thing that I like if there was a drinking game, like how quickly I would mention it in any podcast or interview, like people would do a lot of shots because I always find a way to work it in. But
It's
ROM was
worth
this
it.
childhood love of mine, and so I working with Hasbro years ago, I'd spent a lot of time, like years, like almost a decade, chasing the idea of bringing ROM back into the world. I really
Hmm.
just wanted to bring it back into print. Like those books had never been reprinted because of license lapsing and legal issues and all of that. And so I just wanted there to be a reprint series so everybody could hopefully see what I saw in it.
Hmm.
And so I chased that, with no real resolution for about a decade. But then Hasbro gave us the comic rights to relaunch the series all new. And it's always an uphill battle to do that when you're removing the elements that people love, which is, we're plucking the character out, but we don't have the Marvel universe around it. And so there was always going to be a contingent of fans that will only accept the version that they knew from their childhood, which, is a sentiment I totally understand. But I
Right,
love
right.
that I could bring Rom back in that way and kind of pay off my years of talking about the character and at least sort of try to bring my love of the character through into the comic series.
Yeah, yeah. I connect with Rom in a couple of ways, not the least of which is I'm from a small West Virginia town, which is
Oh,
where he
nice.
sort of crash lands. Um,
Claritin, yeah.
yeah, it sort of has those really classic B movie kind of vibes, you
Totally.
know?
Body snatchers and like
Yeah.
the paranoid, you don't know if you can trust your neighbor because they might be a murderous alien kind of thing. Like I love that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. Um, totally a title that resonates.
And I'm
Absolutely.
not claiming that the series and my incessant talking about it is what got Marvel to finally get those rights unlocked with Hasbro, but now they're doing the big omnibus collection next year. They
Hmm.
re-released the first issue as a replica edition just a month ago, and then nicely they asked me to contribute the introduction to the omnibus that they're doing for both that series and the Micronauts omnibus. So it's been fun for me to have a reason to go back and revisit that old material too.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it could not have hurt that
Right.
you've been a cheerleader for the series by any means.
I like to think so. Yeah. I mean, just trying to keep ROM alive in whatever ways possible. So I'm glad people can finally experience the old material after, 4 decades or so out of print.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, did you want to mention anything else for that first
Yeah.
initial
So there was
question?
that
Yep.
one. I mean, Zombies versus Robots was certainly one because that started this long, very fruitful creative partnership with Ashley Wood, who was the artist, painter, co-creator of the series with me. And so we've been working together now. God, that was 2006 we launched that. So,
Hmm.
17 years. We now have our own little imprint called Syzygy, that's distributed by Image Comics. So we're still doing ZVR comics here and there. We're doing some other things. So that one was fun because it was, I was sort of early on in my IDW career,
Hmm.
still figuring out how to tell stories with somebody like Ash, who is not necessarily as narratively focused as writers as much as he is on the art side, making the art really something special. So it's been fun to try to tell a nonsensical sort of disjointed story that also had enough coherence to make sense to people and have some kind of a followable through line.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I've always enjoyed that. Like there's no page I get from him that doesn't vastly exceed what I envision in my head.
Love that.
Um, and then getting to work with guys like Clive Barker on an adaptation of Clive's novel, getting to work with Sam Keith on creating a couple series, Mars Attacks, and then we did a book together called The Hollows.
Hmm.
Working with guys like John Byrne, Joe Hill, people that like I love their work before I worked with them, and so is getting to work with people like that is just immensely creatively satisfying, especially when they turn out to be great people to know too.
Yeah, yeah, that's it's an impressive uh group of people to work with. It's almost you know how Barnes and Noble used to have those mugs that would have like famous creators on them. It's
Yeah,
almost
yeah.
one of those kind of things of like who's in the coffee shop.
I mean, I
Um,
will say I sort of had the luxury of I was IDW's second editor in chief,
mhm,
and when I at least have had a role where I could get many creators to reply to me. And so the first thing I did when you take that kind of job is like you want to live out your childhood dreams of working with these people who you admired growing up, the people that made you love comics. And so the nice thing is that I've gotten to do that. And like I say, that I've gotten to know them and sort of admire them as human beings as well as creators. So that part, like there's two real gratifying parts about working in comics. One is working with or giving work to people that you love growing up.
mhm,
And then also finding new creators and helping new creators find their way in the field too. Like both of those things feel like, I don't know, I felt like those are both responsibilities of mine where if I can give work to people who are underemployed, great, or people I love, who other fans are also going to like, that's great. But if I could
mhm.
also help new people get in, get published, and hopefully go on to, do a lot of other great things, that's also stuff I love doing.
I love that. Love that as an editorial vision. And always I appreciate the kindness that comes through and things like that of not only helping those that are coming along, but connecting to those that you really appreciate too. So yeah, yeah, very cool. Very cool.
I'm trying to think if I mean, there's a lot. I've worked on a lot of books, not only as writer but also as editor, and so you get to work with other writers and artists that I don't know are just inspiring and fun to deal with and
Hmm.
make great stuff. And so just being in that sort of collective environment is just always invigorating to me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Um, so with that idea of kind of the creative environment, you could have chosen a lot of outlets. I'm curious about the uniqueness of comics. That's a question that I like to ask pretty often. Like, what is it about comics that made you go, yes, this is the thing, this is the medium for me?
I mean, I think part of it was that it was always the thing. Like I had an
Hmm.
older brother, and so he collected comics, and so the like from the time I opened my eyes or was able to flip through pages of anything, there were comic books in my life, and so I developed this love for them early on. Like I was an avid reader and collector by age 6, which is wild to me that I was already that deep into having a monthly habit on finding ways to do chores to get that quarter to go buy the next
Hmm.
issue of Fantastic Four, whatever it was. And so comics were a thing that I loved everything that they offered. Like they offered a way to tell stories that not only were, like you say, collaborative, like I love collaborating with other people, but also just the melding of words and pictures and sound effects and captions and thought balloons and all the very unique tools that comics offers to tell a story, where you don't have, I don't know, the shorthand or the easy outs of like music cues or sounds or things like that that can kind of influence the way people experience the story. You have to take all these very static pieces and assemble them like the color forms that I love when I was a kid. You're putting these things down on paper and trying to use them in a compelling way that makes people want to keep turning pages. And for me, like I love finding the ones that made me want to keep turning pages. And so
Hmm.
that's kind of forever my aim in telling stories through comic form is just, can I do stuff that makes people hopefully want to keep turning pages? And so it keeps you honest, and it keeps you just trying to not only use all those different storytelling techniques, but also partner with the right people that, where you can kind of make a collective whole that's better than the parts kind of
Hmm.
thing. And so, I've done some prose, like I've done speech writing, I've done technical writing, I've done advertising copy, a lot of different kinds of writing. Um, and a lot of it, it's fine and good. And I like parts of it. And I like the journalistic aspect of some of the like website writing I used to do. But I mean, for me, there's just never been a way to tell stories that felt as, I don't know, organic to what I like as using comic books.
Hmm. I love that. Yeah. And just imagining the process of sitting down and writing a script and thinking, okay, what does this look like? How do I communicate this to somebody? And then, as you mentioned, um, with Ashley Wood, always being surprised and kind of seeing that brand new thing come through that has some of you in it and some of the other person as well.
Yeah, and I mean it's funny because it can work both ways. Like Sam and Ash both sort of tell stories the way they want them told, and so there were times when I'd write a thing and it was very contingent on this thing happening or being portrayed a certain way. It was kind of the fulcrum for the rest of the story, and then I
Hmm.
get the pages. I'm like, wait, what is this scene? What this? No, this character, you like this character needed to die on that page, and then Ash would go. There was one case where he did that. He kept the character alive. And I go, no, no, the entire story hinges on this character's death. And he goes, I like the character. I don't want to kill him. So then it made me you had to sort of retrofit the story to the art,
Right.
which I loved as a challenge to make sense of something that was entirely different than what I intended. And then, of course, like almost every time, is far better the way he did it. And so I like that too, where it's like kind of that push pull
Yeah.
and finding the best way to tell the story.
Some narrative improv.
Yeah, it absolutely.
Love it. So you mentioned several collaborators and certainly want to link back to your editorial vision and sensibility. So I would also love to give you the chance to shout out any folks along the way who you discovered or some of those folks that you worked with early on in their career.
Yeah, I mean the probably the greatest example of that is Gabriel Rodriguez, who is probably at this point most well known as a co-creator of Lock and Key.
Hmm.
But when I started working with him, and it was like 2004, 2005, he was drawing CSI comics, doing licensed stuff. He was working for a studio, and not necessarily getting the best breaks. And like even in his earliest days, he was a trained architect before he became a comic artist. But I could see like there was something special in the way he told stories and the way he paced out panels and just tackled camera angles and all those things
Hmm.
that was sort of better than what he was being given at the time. And so I made it my mission to really find the next thing had to be bigger and better and sort of a more high profile fit for what he could do because I knew he was up for the task and I just wanted to make sure that he kept getting more and more of the kinds of opportunities I thought he deserved. And so we quickly went from CSI to doing, I don't know if I remember the exact order, but it was like we did an adaptation of Neil Gaiman's Beowulf.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, we did, I think before that, we did the George Romero Land of the Dead movie adaptation.
Hmm.
And then we did the big Clive Barker's adaptation of Great and Secret Show, and then Lock and Key came along, and so it was trying to kind of keep setting him on a higher and higher path because I wanted the world to appreciate him as much as I did, and I think not only do they, but I think Gabe has just completely continued to improve as an artist, and just like I thought he was great from the start. He's only gotten better, and so that's one that has been really gratifying just to see that he's gotten to break through and sort of have a book that caught people's attention in such a big way and is held up as sort of one of the high watermarks in comics. And so, yeah, that's probably for me the best example of it. But
Hmm.
working with somebody like Brian Lynch, who's just an amazing writer, he's been writing movies the last dozen years, or and writing some prose books. But he and I worked on Angel, we extending the season from where the TV show ended. And Brian, I just like his skill with dialogue is just second to none. Like, so that was one with him and the artist Franco Uru, who's another guy that I didn't think got enough attention in his too short life. Just things like that where I don't know. There's a lot of great collaboration, but there's very few that feel special to the point where, like, at the time I'm like, I need to really just take note of this every single day because it's not always going to be here with these guys.
Hmm.
And I know this is just something special and something that keeps me excited about doing this stuff. So there's been a lot of those along the way, and I'm very gratified and lucky to have had those. But yeah, there are definitely some that stand out even above and beyond the normal good working relationships, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. But the more I get to know the world of comics, it seems to be a generally friendly place. I'm sure that there are less friendly interactions and encounters, but love those stories of folks collaborating and sort of supporting each other creatively and working on just wonderful projects with great characters. So, yep.
Yeah, I mean, so Lock and Key to me is also one of those that's just on the mountaintop for me, where not only do I find it just so creatively satisfying and gratifying that it found the big audience that it did, and then eventually became a TV show, but Joe Hill and Gabriel are just two of the greatest people I've ever met in my life.
Mhm.
And so just getting to know them and be friends with them and sort of have meaningful relationships with them, even above and beyond just making comics with them, is just one of those special things. Like you say, there's on the fringes of every industry, there's the cranks, but for
Sure.
the most part, yeah, most everybody is there to help each other and prop each other up, and sort of I think everybody realizes what a difficult industry it can be and how hard it is to not only get in but to stay in. And
Mhm.
so the majority of the people I've worked with have been really good about just being helpful and nice and kind and fun to work with.
Yeah.
And the ones that aren't, you just don't work with them anymore.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Good decisions, good life decisions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so you mentioned you're working on or have worked on the introductions for the omnibi. Is that the
Yeah.
correct plural of omnibus? So curious about the creative steps and the things that you're currently exploring.
Yeah, so I'm doing a book. So Ashley and I launched a series called Tales of Spence. It's a split book, and so because the company's Syzygy, we thought we'd be cute and name it after, a famous Marvel split book from the past. And so he's doing a story, and then I'm doing a story with an artist named Nelson Daniel, who I've worked with on a number of things. Judge Dredd, which was another high water mark for me, working with him and the writer Dwayne Swarzynski on that. But Nelson and I are doing a book called Dreamweaver, which is about it's kind of a play on the idea of like Green Lantern when Aben Sur realized he was too old. Well, he was realized he was dying, and so he handed
Mhm.
the ring off to somebody younger to carry on the mantle. This is kind of that same approach where a hero in his 50s realizes he just can't cut it anymore. He finds somebody younger, hands his powers off, and then has to watch as they do far better than he does,
Mhm.
and he decides, well, wait a second, like I don't want this young punk taking all the credit that could have been mine. Like I wasn't out for the glory. I was just trying to do good. And so then he sort of does the heel turn and has to realize he's almost become the bad guy and trying to want attention back that he really should have. And I mean, I won't say that it's kind of a barely veiled version of me, like, trying to stay in comics and trying to keep things going and sort of like I was talking about handing off to the next generation, but also still wanting you're part of things and feeling like you still have things to say. And so
Mhm.
it's a thing that I wanted to do for like 20 years, but I probably wasn't in as particular a place to do it as after being, you know, moved out of a job that I held for a long time and cared about for a long time, and which kind of then just changes your perspective on everything. And so
Right.
it feels like the writer time to tell that sort of story, even though I'm, you know, trying to have fun with it and make sure there's no shrill tones to it or anything like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I'm doing that, and I'm doing a book with Francis Coppola, which is just a wild sentence to even utter. But
Right.
yeah, he hired me to do a graphic novel with him around the movie Megalopolis that he says is going to be his final movie. And so
Wow.
that's thrilling as can be because I'm working not only with him directly, but also oh, Jacob Phillips is the artist, and Jacob I think is a great talent, and so I think that one's just really exciting. I got to kind of please the younger me by doing a collection of these old Marvel calendars that I loved as a kid. We're doing a collection of those things that have never been collected in any form before. So Abrams Comic Arts is putting that out in early 24, and I'm doing another Marvel archival thing. So just just trying to stay, I don't know, as busy and as scattered, I guess, as possible, and stay at this as long as I'm able.
Yeah, yeah. Well, nothing you mentioned just now. I'm picturing myself trying to say no to one of those things, and it's like you're absolutely. I'm
That
in
is the
for all of
massive
that.
adjustment I've had to deal with as a going freelance the last couple of years. Is I didn't have to worry about the economics of it all when I had steady employment.
Hmm.
So then I was like, all right, I'm going to say yes to everything that sounds fun. And then you realize, well, that was maybe not a great idea because there's no way to do everything well if you're too overrun. So then, it's
Sure.
the freelancer thing that every freelancer I've ever worked with goes, yeah, yeah, we know, we that deal with that for years. And so trying to figure out like how to best use the time that you have to make the stuff you most want to make.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it sounds like there is a lot of good stuff on the way.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of
And
stuff. Hopefully people think it's good. Yeah.
it sounds great to me. Francis Ford Coppola. Um, yeah. Oh, sorry. I'll edit out my barking dog if that
No.
came through.
Oh, I didn't even hear it. No.
Oh, okay, great. So yeah, anything that we've missed in the talk through before we close out?
The only other thing is I'd say I started doing a Substack the last couple months, which kind of takes me back to I used to run a website for Kevin Smith and did all these weekly writings about comics and movies and film, and so it's fun to flex those old muscles again and do that as a way to talk about the projects and other things. Shares to other stuff I'm excited about. Talk about old comics that I love, like just all of that. Just kind of trying to celebrate all the parts of the industry that I'm just so flattered to have been able to work in for almost 20 years now.
Awesome, awesome things. Thank you for spending some time with me. I hope to talk with you again in the future as projects unfold, and glad to share about your work.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.